biological thing, because a lot of people talk about the biological issues as if it was something new. I hope I have covered some ground to show you it's been there forever. We're just starting to learn it. I saw some of the first slides that you showed us where it was daylight. It was probably the same. This is more like a theoretical sketch. Yours were more accurate. Always nice to see accurate sketches. So the story is just when you get light into your eyes, you have a visual pathway to the visual center, but you also have a biological pathway that controls the balance between cortisol and melatonin. And if you have a low melatonin level and a high cortisol level, you feel awake and creative and things like that in a good way. If you wake up by an alarm clock or slapping your face, then it's sort of adrenaline that kicks in. And that's not a nice way to wake up. If you drink a lot of coffee, it's caffeine that kicks in. That's not good either. The real good way of waking up is having the right light that sort of tells your body, it's morning, get up. And that's the right way to treat it. So I have a very high respect for these kind of lighting situation that actually controls the daily rhythm, because that's what it does. It regulates the daily rhythm and the annual rhythm. There's a lot of research being done on that. I could bore you with that for hours. I won't cover it anymore today because I trust that most of you guys and girls already know all these things. So what I would like to focus on is this balance that we have low melatonin and high cortisol during the day where we are working. In the night, it's the opposite. Low values of melatonin, high values of cortisol around 2 o'clock in the night where we have the absolute deepest sleep. And that leads to the rhythm of our biology. You see, everything, we are going back to Africa again. Sorry to drag you to and from all the time, but we're actually going back to Africa because if we were in Africa, we have our V lambda curve, which is the photopic sensitivity of the human eye, and we have the response of the biological sensitivity. And in Scandinavia, we have a daylight curve that looks a little bit like this, with a color temperature of around 6,500 Kelvin. So if we're outside, everything is A-OK. We have more than enough light to see what goes on here in our visual spectrum, and we have more than enough light in the biological to tell us that it is day and that we are awake. The challenge comes when we move indoor, because we move indoor and we are exposed to artificial light. And if you guys ask for light sources with a high efficiency, high lumens per watt, you know lumens is defined by the energy released inside the photopic sensitivity curve. So if we want to produce light sources which has a high output, we need to release almost all the energy inside this wavelength, inside this pattern here. And that's how modern light sources look. So we have lots of light in here to do the visual task, but virtually no light in there to tell the body that it's day. So if we move from outside to the inside, our body thinks that the sun has set and it's night. And that's why we tend to fall asleep when we're indoor. You know this thing about being tired at 2 o'clock, for instance. That's because you've been away from daylight for around 6 hours and you feel really tired. You normally don't fall asleep if you're digging in the garden at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's normal because you're outside, you're in a natural environment, and you don't become tired the same way when you start to go into an artificial surrounding. A lot of people ask themselves, if we have blue-enriched light sources, we need a little more blue light, and we would like to examine whether a 3,000 Kelvin like this one is more powerful, or we should switch to a 4,000 Kelvin. Well, you always need to check around these 460 nanometers to see if there is blue-enriched energy in here, because we can create the different color temperatures in different ways. And one way is to, if we move from 3,000 to 4,000 Kelvin, it's to add some green and to subtract some of the orange, and then add a little blue, and it'll change its color temperature. But it will not be a blue-enriched light source that actually has a biological function. So one of the tests that Fagerhult launched in 2007, I think, was to find the appropriate luminance level at different color temperatures. So we had this study going on at Lund University in Sweden, where the task was to have 2 groups of students, 36 subjects were placed at workstations. One of the reference rooms was equipped with 3,000 Kelvin, the other one with 4,000 Kelvin T5 tubes. We were illuminating the walls within the visual center line plus minus 30 degrees, and we changed the brightness of the walls from 20 up to 350 candles per square meter to find out how much light we need in the surrounding area to trigger a biological response to keep people awake in a natural way. We've all talked about that we need lighting on vertical surfaces for many years. Now we were starting to do some serious research about it. And what we found out, well, we also kept the constant brightness or constant luminous values of 500 lux on the keyboard, so that didn't have any influence. 20 candles per square meter was too dark. 350 was a bit too bright. So we landed between 80 and 100 candles per square meter. So if you want to do lighting for people at vertical surfaces, in offices or in classes, we recommend you to have a value around 80 to 100 candela per square meter on any vertical surface, based on this one. But this was a study done in the lab in the university. What we really was interested in was taking it out to do some really serious big-scale test. And we got that result last year from a study called the Partur's study, where we worked with the University of London, and we had an elementary school for a year with 4 classes of second grade students being 8 to 9 years old. And the school is situated like this, that in the basement we have a control room and an experimental room, and on the first floor we have another control room and another experimental room. And in these rooms we made a traditional lighting system in one of the rooms, and we made an advanced lighting system in another room. One of the previous speakers also covered the daylight factor, and you will notice a daylight factor of around 5.5 is pretty high, but that's because we're on the first floor. We have windows on both sides of the classrooms, so we actually have a pretty high daylight input in both the reference or the control group and the experimental room. As soon as we move to the ground floor, we only have 1 row of windows, and hence a more normal daylight factor of around 2%. This is the classical layout of the lighting fixtures, ceiling-mounted fixtures, downward, and this is the new layout that we made with dynamic lighting fixtures suspended both upward and downward, and asymmetrical fixtures, powerful high output asymmetrical fixtures illuminating the vertical surfaces, creating a certain brightness in the room. Because whenever we talk about perceived brightness, we always perceive what's going on in front of us and not so much what's going on there and down here. So it's the horizontal plus minus 30 degrees angle we are talking about. So if we turn the light on here, it looks like this. In the control room on the first floor, we have around 80 lux on the ceiling, 300 lux on the tables, and 120 lux on the walls. Pretty normal, actually. If we move to the experimental room, we have a ceiling luminance or ceiling lighting level between or around 300 lux, around 500 to 600 lux on the working plane, and between 350 and 650 lux on the walls. And that's quite a lot. The reason why we have a slash in here is we have dynamic lighting. It's DALI controlled with a router solution where we boost the lighting in the morning. We regulate it down to save energy during the day, and we boost it after lunch again. This one is a permanent solution where we constantly have around 300 lux on the ceiling, 500 lux on the desk, and 300 lux on the walls. And that's again compared to the control group over here. I hope this just gives you a feeling about the brightness and the intensity in the various rooms, because I would like to flip to the results showing you that the comparison in the cortisol level. Remember I said we need high cortisol, low melatonin to be alert and awake. So if you see the experimental room here has a higher concentration in the bloodstream of the pupils, and in the control room they have a lower. We are pretty interested in the dark periods moving from October up to